Gabriel René is the CEO and founder of Versus AI, which is developing infrastructure for artificial intelligence software. And so, Gabriel, welcome to the NASDAQ First. And let's just start with, what is AI? We've heard so much about it. How do you define it?
You know, every time one of these new major technologies kind of breaks in, you know, everything from the car to the internet to now artificial intelligence, everyone tries to orient themselves. You know, so first we talked about cars as, you know, sort of horseless carriages. People talked about the internet as a series of tubes, famously.
Yes,
and
World Wide Web.
Yes, the World Wide Web, information superhighway.
Right,
so it's really hard to make sense of these things. We use a lot of metaphors. The easiest way to think about AI, in my opinion, is to think about software itself. So the last several decades, software has taken over and basically controls everything. I mean, the cameras in this room, our coffee pots at home, now they're driving our cars, they run our accounting systems. AI is smart software. So instead of us giving the directions, us programming it and telling it what to do, it figures it out by itself. So you take something like a smart car, you want to say, well, here's the destination, but I want you to figure out how to get me there intelligently and safely, right? And so that's what it is. It's smart software that's going to replace or upgrade all the software in the world. And that's why, you know, McKinsey thinks this is a $2 trillion market opportunity by the end of the decade, which is unprecedented even in the technology space. Yeah,
well, we've heard so much about generative AI. I mean, that was the thing that I really feel like pushed it into the mainstream, was that it could it had content generation.
Yeah.
It could take a lot of different data and come up with its own answer. And so is that where you see things going?
I think that's the starting point, right? And so this breakthrough we've seen with ChatGPT and these other sort of content generators that can do text or images, we're starting to see a little bit of video. Generative AI is just the beginning. The goal of all the major companies, including OpenAI, who's created ChatGPT and others, is to create what's called artificial general intelligence. That's like human level intelligence, the ability to adapt and sort of be useful in any sort of situation. And obviously, if you could give people that kind of power, in the same way that I think that Steve Jobs saw the personal computing revolution, it's like a personal intelligence revolution. And imagine if you had a personal assistant for anything, or your child, you know, maybe has a learning disability, suddenly has an intelligent assistant that can help them to learn in a special way. And of course, powering all the physical aspects of our world with robots and drones and cars and autonomous supply chains. I mean, the productivity gains that, you know, many are predicting could be as high as 30% gain. So while we're all worried about the markets being X% down and interest rates being sky high, imagine a $25 trillion boon for the global economy over the next decade or so from the productivity and efficiency gains of AI.
Just the value that it will create.
It's a value creation engine.
So what separates Versus from, you know, you mentioned OpenAI, and you know, a lot of companies are working on it. How are you different?
Well, you know, the current state of AI is really the result of a very particular approach. Kind of like if you had the idea back in the day of humans wanting to fly. That was one of the last big wild ideas we had was, how do we take to the skies? And you know, a lot of companies and businesses, people very smart, that said, well, let's make an engine and we'll make something with flapping wings. So it'll flap like the birds, and maybe we'll get a little bit of air. Some of them said, well, let's just add more wings and maybe that'll fly better. And so they took this sort of engineering-based approach. And this is really how people are doing AI today. OpenAI, Anthropic, Coherent, basically all the sort of children of Google AI, which is where this all really started in Silicon Valley. And the problem with this approach is that it doesn't really understand intelligence itself. And so the Wright brothers, as an example, and use the flying metaphor, they built a wind tunnel in a barn and they figured out how aerodynamics works. And that's what Versus has done for intelligence. We have studied, most of my team on the R&D side are computational neuroscientists, not just computer scientists. In fact, my chief scientist is Professor Carl Friston, who's the top neuroscientist in the world. And he has uncovered the underlying neurodynamics of intelligence. And we've been able to now encode the sort of processes in natural intelligence, in living biological things, into software. So we don't even really consider it artificial intelligence. It's more like an organic intelligence applied to software systems.
Yeah.
And that's what I think the big breakthrough here enables AIs that can learn in real time, that can adapt to any situation, basically train on your data, whether it's your personal data or whether it's a company's data, can operate in software systems, making that smart accounting system or smart recommendation system for a Netflix or some entertainment system like Amazon Prime, but also in robotic systems. There's been a huge challenge of trying to get to autonomous car level 5, where they can drive themselves, and the regulators don't trust these things because they keep having these sort of problems.
Okay.
The limitations of the current approach are a bit like just adding more wings to the plane. You can get a little more air, but you can't really fly from LA to New York. And we believe that we have a much more solid first principles based approach. And we're rolling out our new product with customers actually just starting this month that is going to start to showcase this.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Is that Genius? Is that the platform?
Yes.
Okay.
So the product is called Genius. The term is inspired from the idea of the genius of nature. How do we apply what we understand in biological intelligence into software systems? And so Genius is essentially a data pipeline. So you can give it any kind of data, multi-sensory data, images, text, audio, video, and it's able to process this into kind of a world model, like a multi-sensory world model, kind of like how we have mental models of the world, and we operate on those. And then we have these biological algorithms that could learn and adapt in real time, so making things far more customizable, far more adaptable. And importantly, if you've looked at some of the latest information on AI, ours are hyper efficient, because it turns out evolution wanted intelligence to be very efficient, not just kind of crawl all the data in the world and have tens of thousands of servers required to sort of crank these things up. So we think we have a much more powerful way. This allows for users and businesses, and we're focused on developers. We're doing a 6-month pilot with 10 hand-selected customers across several different industries. But in the spring, we're going to open this up for developers to be able to develop now smart applications for anything. Again, take every kind of software you think about in the world that needs to become smart. That's the entire range of applications that might be possible that people can build on top of Genius.
I was going to ask about that. Can you give us a practical example of
Sure.
like how we may use this in our everyday
Pick
life?
any industry or any use case, and I'll explain.
Grocery shopping.
Grocery shopping, perfect example. So tomorrow, in a smarter world where Genius has been adopted, your refrigerator by Whirlpool or whomever may be running on Genius software.
Okay.
And it will be able to recognize and understand all of the products that are in there. It's going to inventory itself. It might be connected to your smartwatch or your calendar or your fitness instructor's information, and it's going to order directly from the store.
I was going to ask about that.
Yes. And by the way, if you're like I'm come from California, if you're gluten-free this week, it might be able to know that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
If you're
sure
not
it would.
gluten-free, so this ability to adapt and adjust, customize and personalize anything, and sort of learn as you go is a really critical thing. And it's really what we want from technology. And we're finally at a position now where we kind of move from the information age to the intelligence age, where everything starts to become smart like this.
Well, and that learning from itself,
Yeah.
software, it can be wonderful, but also can be a little scary, I think, for some
Absolutely,
people. Okay, so explain that. I mean, how do you make sure this isn't a technology that gets out of control?
Well, this has been, it's become the top concern for governments really in the last 6 months. And it's a bit wild because 12 months ago, hardly anyone was paying any attention to AI at all. Now you've got, the Biden administration meeting in closed rooms with a number of the leaders in the AI space from Silicon Valley. We worked with Dentons, the largest law firm in the world, and we put out an 80-page report about 2 months ago called The Future of Global AI Governance. And in it calls for standards for AI interoperability to make sure these things work together. Imagine if we had wall plugs that every single device needed a different wall plug. Nothing would work in our homes, right? So we need sort of the ability for these things to be combined. AI explainability, which is really one of the top concerns, because all of the current AI companies out of Silicon Valley are basically building AIs that are so massive, they're these big black boxes that they can't really understand. And unfortunately, they have bias built into them because they've learned from crawling information on the web.
Okay.
And we know the web is not necessarily the arbiter of all truth.
That's very true.
And so you end up getting, these issues around bias. They can be used for misinformation if you're able to generate stuff. So standards for explainability is key. And of course, there's this real concern that if any of these companies do build human-level intelligence into AI, that then it may learn to accelerate itself beyond human intelligence, and then how do you control those? So this is one reason why we developed these standards, because they enable AI interoperability, AI explainability, and most importantly, AI governance. And we've tested this with the European Commission for the last 3 years. These standards defining where AI-powered drones can or cannot fly, whether they can fly over a certain number of people, a certain distance. So it's important that our laws are actually something that machines can understand and obey if we're going to put them into our streets, into our schools, into our homes, and perhaps even, if they shrink them down small enough, into our bodies.
Yeah.
So the governance over the data and the governance over the activities of these systems is critically important. 5 years ago, when we started the company, we recognized this. That's why we donated that capability of these underlying modeling standards to the IEEE, who's the largest standards body in the world, who, by the way, did standardize every electrical plug in this building, and also standardized Ethernet, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and others. So now we'll have standards for AI governability as well.
IEEE. So, because as you were talking, I was thinking about who would govern this. Would it be the UN or,
right,
because it does really have to be a global standards.
Yes.
Right? Where does that go?
Yeah. So it turns out there's a hidden layer of the world that we don't pay much attention to, which is these global standards organizations with hundreds of thousands of engineers and scientists that are involved. The IEEE is one of the largest technical bodies, actually started with electricity and moved on to electronic things, which leads us to computers and AIs and everything else. ISO is the International Standards Organization, and there's a handful of others, geospatial data, so that whether it's satellites or rockets or spaceships or our cars or just us walking down the street, that those things are standardized, which means manufacturers then know the specifications for how to build things. And so we selected the IEEE in part because we're in that sort of technology-focused space. And even the UN or the digital ministers of the G7, they look to the IEEE and ISO and others for direction on these kinds of things because, in fact, they've even been around longer.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, finally, Gabriel, what's next for Versus AI, would you say?
We are rolling out our Genius beta program with the sort of 10 customers across 10 different industries that I mentioned that can start to use this for data analysis, for recommendations, for automating robots, for all kinds of very cool applications. And then in the spring, we're going to be rolling out this product for millions of developers, just like the developers that develop every app on your phone, but now they'll be able to build smarter apps and smarter applications for everything. I think from here on, I genuinely believe that this natural approach to intelligent software is going to become the foundational layer and the underlying infrastructure of AI in this new intelligence age. And I think Versus is best positioned to be the leader in that space.
Yeah, fascinating. So thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it.